So what are you doing?
I'm mixing soil.
Very exciting.
It's a bit boring, isn't it? How are we going to do a video on that? I guess you do need to know about it, to be fair, boring as it might be. So yeah, I don't know. Let's see if we can do a video on it and not fall asleep. Why don't you just use any old soil? That's the first thing to say. You know, so bonsai soil has three qualities, right? So number one, it has good drainage, because if you leave roots sat in just sopping wet muck, the roots can rot. The second thing to say is that it needs good water retention.
Yeah, it needs to be able to hold some water back so it can still have a drink and not dry out too quick.
Okay.
Good aeration.
Yeah, good aeration, because roots breathe, of course, you know.
Yeah.
And then I suppose the last thing to say is that it needs to hold its structure for a period of time. Now, if you think about it, your tree is going to be growing in this soil for a minimum of a couple of years, and anything up to maybe 4 or 5 years, maybe more. Do you see what I mean? So you do need something that holds its structure for that length of time and doesn't break down.
Because if it does break down too quick, all your air pockets in the soil will start closing up, and yeah, it'll not be very good for your tree in the long run, will it? So
no,
it does need to hold its form for a good period of time.
And this is why you don't just use compost on its own. I mean, everybody at the beginning, they'll start off just using just compost and nothing else, because it's easy and you can get it from anywhere, and it's cheap as anything. Do you see what I mean? But the example I use when I'm talking to people in the shop about it is, I say, right, think about a hanging basket. Think about, you plant your hanging basket in the spring and you leave your hanging basket outside, and then come the autumn, your hanging basket's done, and you pull the lump out from inside the middle of the hanging basket, and all you've got is this little dried out lump of compost. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So what's happened is that it's shrunk down and it's all compacted, and it's only been in there for 6 months, remember. So, you know, with a bonsai, as we've just said, it's going to be in there for years. It's not going to be in there for a few months, and therefore that structure thing comes in. This is the soil mix that I'm going to show you how to make today, basically. So have a good look in here and have a look at it. Look. So what we've got then is we've got a granular soil where each of the little granules holds water, but where excess water will flow away. So we've got a fairly uniform particle size. We haven't got any great big bits in there, nor have we got any dust in there. So what we've done is then we've used a sieve and we've used the raw material parts to produce something that looks exactly like that, which is what we're after. Okay, so the first step for this soil mix then is to get some pumice ready. So I've got one of the stainless soil sieves here. These are really good for doing this. You've got different grades of sieve, anything from a little sort of 2 or 3 mil up to about a 5 or 6 mil sieve there. So I can swap those over, which is, as I say, really handy for doing the soil mixes. So put my fine sieve in there first. Okay, I've got my raw pumice here, so wang that in there, and then a bit of shaky there. So if you have a look in here now, I've got some of the dust essentially, which we wouldn't want in our bonsai soil, you know. So by just sieving that out, we can get rid of that, and then it's not damaging the drainage.
So why are we sieving it again?
Well, I've got different sizes of particles in this mix here, haven't I, to be fair? I mean, come and have a look. This is all the pumice, right? I've got individual, quite large grains of pumice here. Can you see those there? Look how big they are. Yeah, you got those. And then in with that, there's some much smaller stuff. You see this stuff here, how much smaller it is?
Yeah.
Right, okay. So, yeah, it breaks down like this, right? For my smaller trees, I want to use a smaller particle size. For my bigger trees, I want to use a bigger particle size. And the reason for that is because if I use the big stuff on a small tree, it's going to drain far too freely and I'll be watering every 10 minutes. Do you see what I mean? Whereas if I use the small particles on a large tree, it's going to hold too much water. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to balance the drainage and the water retention over different pot sizes. The idea being that, fingers crossed, my trees will all dry out at a uniform rate. It won't be that I have to water the small ones too much and the big ones get too much water. Do you see what I mean? It's all a question of balance. So using my larger sized sieve, what I've got then is I've got the smaller particles underneath, I've got the larger particles in the top. So my large stuff is going to go into one tub, and then my small stuff is going to go into another one.
Can you just separate like that?
That's it, yeah, keep working your way through that lot. And that'll be the first stage done. Again, lava comes in an enormous great sack, The particle size overall is smaller, but it's very, very dusty. So the sieving, using the fine sieve, is very important. As you can see, the particle size is nice and small. There's a lot of dust in the bottom though, so yeah, that just goes into here and we're done.
Definitely worth doing then.
Oh, 100%. If you don't, it's an absolute disaster for your trees. It really is.
And that's it. Just whip through until you've got enough.
Keep going. That's it. Yeah.
What are we doing?
We're actually going to mix soil now. Woo! So I've got some akadama. Now, there's a question about whether akadama is any good for the UK climate. Because it does break down when it gets frosted. So when you go through that winter cycle where 1 minute it's freezing, the next minute it thaws and then freezes and thaws, that can cause the akadama to break down. Now, if you keep your trees in a greenhouse for the winter, that won't happen as much. So the akadama is going to be much more long lasting. Whereas if you keep your trees outside, it's arguably possible that akadama is not actually very useful for your soil mixes. So that's what my take on it really. Anyway, that's what I think. But it's up to you to find out what works for you. So 1/3 akadama, 1/3 lava, and then we've got some pumice which is just in there. So I'll get myself a litre of that.
That is a litre in there. I'll pause that one.
Oh great stuff, right, okay. There we go. So
it's just a 1-to-1 ratio.
Yeah, got 1 litre of each, just mixing that through. And there we go, there's a perfectly good soil mix that we use on the trees. You'll notice that at this stage, you might say, well, there's no brown earthy stuff in there, Adam, what's that all about? Now, we sort of as people, we kind of psychologically think that trees need sort of brown earthy muddy stuff to live in, but actually they don't. Having this will give that drainage, that water retention, which will make for really happy roots, and everything will hopefully be well. So yeah, you can, if you want to, put compost in. You could put rotted pine bark in, so you can put something organic in if you want to. I don't necessarily, although sometimes I do, but for the purposes of this mix today, there we go, 3-way split, and that'll work.
And that's generally good for pretty much out, isn't it?
It's good for most things, to be fair. It's good for sort of not tiddly tiny pots and not enormous pots. We'll do separate sieves for that. But for anything from, I don't know, about sort of 6 inches up to about 10 or 12 inches.
Say about that
this
size,
sort of stuff
that's
is going
good.
to be fine. Yeah, it works fine in that, for example. There are certain things where we're going to use ericaceous soil, so the ericaceous ones would, for the best example is the azaleas, we'd use a slightly different soil mix for that. But for most things, it's a general soil mix. There will be exceptions. So there we go, that's the bonsai soil one. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you liked the video. Sorry it is slightly boring, but yeah, you made it through to the end, so yeah, we'll see you soon.